Okay, Shalom Aleichem, Schapiro, thank you very much for coming on today.
No, sure, no question. This is important, so I agree right away.
No, no. Okay, so we have it's Leibel's first year site. We all know the Leibel as the Toiser of the Rebbe, the Mashkina for so many years, for so many suffering in the life. So if you could share with us a little bit about your own experiences with Leibel, when you first got to know him.
Okay, if you want to start from when I first got to know him, is there's two levels in getting to know him. To know who he is one thing, and then to get to know him. So my first Fabringen, my first Yechidus I was Tovshin Yud Gimel when my parents came from Europe after the war. So I went to Yechidus before we moved to Cleveland. They joined them to Cleveland. I went to Yechidus, but Fabringen, the first time I was by the Rebbe's Fabringen was Tovshin Yud Ches, Tovshin Chai, for Simchas Torah Tovshin Chai. And I remember the tziyur as a kid. I was a young kid then, and I remember the tziyur of after the Fabringen, the Chazorah, and everyone pointed out this is Rabbi, very young man with like yellow glasses. And I was listening to them just as a kid to Chazorah, and obviously I didn't understand much. I just saw that his Chit Chadivur is not clear, and the truth is like this: that as great as his inyan was of being able to be masbir inyanim, you had to get used to his Chit Chadivur, to the way he spoke. So that took a few moments till you got into it, but then when you found out, you could see who he was. So that's the first time I got to know who he is, and I was in awe of this person, Rabbi Yehuda, the Rebbe's Chayzer. But then when I came to learn to New York, after my bar mitzvah, I came in the end of Tovshin Chov. I came in El Tovshin Chov. I came to learn. I went to Bedford, and he was one of the mashpiyim in Bedford. So the first year the Seder was 1 year you learn by Lis, and another year in Chassidus. Next year you learn Chassidus. 3 years in Sifte Hastas. It doesn't call them Sifte, they call it Shivik Tana or whatever. Maybe Sifte. So 1 year by Rabbi Lis, 1 year by Rabbi David Rask, and 1 by Rabbi Yael. So the first year I learned by Rabbi Lis, but I got closer to Rabbi Yael. So the next year I learned a little bit by Rabbi David, but I used to go into Rabbi Yael's classes. How did we get close? Because the Seder used to be that after every Fabringen, Shabbos Zikifar, Shabbos Mvorcha, wherever the Fabringen was, the next day, Shich Siddur that he was not a Shich Siddur, the Rabbi Yael would Chazar the Sichos for, besides Chazara that he had in some 70, the official Chazara, he did it for us boys, 13, 14, 15-year-old boys. And that was for everybody. So I was there, and I used to sometimes write down the Sichos as a young kid like that. And B'meila made our relationship closer. And then I started even in the middle of the second year going into his Shir Chassidus, and I got to hear his Shiurim. And I got, like, I wouldn't use the word friendly because it's a Talmud, Mashpia, Mushpas type of thing, but that's what he had. His Ashpoah was so great then. And when he was in Bedford, that's when he really put in a lot of work. The Seis used to bring by special year with the Pagris, not Stamazay. And again, we were 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. And he would verbring a ganze Nacht. He used to verbring till 6 o'clock in the morning, or other times, special times, he used to verbring. And that had a very great ashpah. So that's when we got close. And basically, if I want to use these words, I don't know if there's proper way to describe it. He molded us. Our kita, actually, it was a very good kita. Then even the boys were young boys, but it was a very good kita. And basically, we were all kalim for it. And he molded us into whatever the light became. Bochrim later and Gelait. It's a lot thanks to him. Now, I have to say the honest truth. His hashpoah was not mainly focused on every yochid. Like some hashpiyim they have a special relationship with this bocher, and they talk to him for hours, and this had hashpoah. His hashpoah was more b'derech makif, but it went into Apnimius. As his hashpoah was the way he verbringt and the way he described things, the way he explained in Yon and do his masber in Yon and Mercedes. So it pushed verangehakt sich in Kopf by us to cook what Chassidus is and what Chassidus Sherid is and how you're supposed to behave. And the main nekuda was, one of the main nekudas is kashrus. Then he verbringt a lot about being bottled to the Rebbe. And you remember, a few verbringen, we cried. Da sein with the Rebbe is a typewriter. Just like a typewriter types. So the typewriter writes a sicher, types a maimer, a ganze maimer. It came from the typewriter. Typewriter is gegazem yada chesed. He was basically talking about himself because he was the chesed. He was, but the bittul that you have to have, and that reingehakt in the kop, and what chassidim mean, the difference between chassidus and not learning chassidus, and those who are not shaykh chassidus, that came from him a lot. That's as far as his hashpoah is concerned on the bochim, and that brought. Doesn't mean that he didn't speak. There were times that he did speak. I remember myself, I had a long conversation with him once. Actually, this was already after we came to 770, because we came to 770. I became 16 years old when I learned the 770. In other words, I came 15 and a half. But he continued being our mashpia. Our class was considered his mishpoim. His mukasharim. The elder bochim 770 used to laugh. Those are mukasharim. But we used to, so even in 770, he came along with us and continued being. So I remember we had a long conversation with him, talking, and one of the things he spoke to me then was the Negeya Tracht Chassidus. In other words, he did not stress so much davening barichas. I mean, he mentioned it in the but that was his focus when he did talk about Chassidus, like learning a lot of Chassidus, verstehen und trachten Chassidus. Trachten Chassidus in order to understand Chassidus, trachten in them. Even he says he once saw a young bocher that was davening with the minyan, but in the middle it was a vertracht, and he even didn't realize that they're saying kedusha, and the chapsach, and he learned to talk around they missed kedusha. So he says he looked at the bocher, and the bocher was very embarrassed. What was he embarrassed? He missed kedusha, but he says that's what I'm talking about. At kedekach, he didn't even chap that they're saying kedusha to get up. So I mean, I remember a long conversation with him. Besides smaller conversation things, but the main thing was not so much the yechidim, but the group. He verbringt with the group. That's as far as his hashpoah and bochim. Actually, the Rebbe, he told me that the Rebbe on Yechidus, after he got married, told him he should speak to the Anhola, they should give him a job of being mashpia. So they gave him the job in Bedford for the young 14, 15-year-old kids. Told me next year when he went into Yechidus, the Rebbe asked him what I said to you last year. So he said, yeah, they gave me a job in Bedford. The Rebbe started smiling. Nicht das er gemeint. Ich habe gemeint auf Bochum. Aber es soll sein. And the emes it soll sein, is geworden. I mean, in other words, he continued being, I don't know, I really don't know if later, after we left Bedford, if he continued being in Bedford, I don't even know, but he continued with us in the 70, and we were with him the whole time. Yeah. That's what the Rebbe wanted. It should be mashpia and bochim. And his hashpoah, it was once I wrote something to the Rebbe. It's whatever it is, it's more personal. I wasn't personal, it was gave to others also, but the Rebbe answered me, Dabri mashpia shaloi. So I went to Rabbi, even though at that time I was already a little older, so he was still our mashpia with no question about it, but we already worked together. So it was a little bit awkward to come to mashpia, but it doesn't matter. And I remember my impression I got from him that this time he really, really spoke to me like a mashpia, like a molek mashpia, which you imagine. That was his chush. And the ikar chush was he was able to be chutz chazorah, which is something in itself that we have to talk about, but his hashpoah in being masbid in yonim chassidus. That, I mean, it's no chidushim when I'm saying everyone knows that. Besides his chit chadib until you got used to it, but afterwards he was able to be Yiddish Stockman avekling nachtelach, the inyonim that he was masbid. When he was masbid inyan, it was so clear to you. It was so clear. He was able. He had the chush in both inyonim. You know, some people have a chush in hafshote. Some people have a chush in halboshe. Some people have the nemen to be mafshit hadvorim megashpiusin, to explain the young chassidus in more in a. And some people have a chush in halboshe, to be malbishet, to bring it down in aces that we could relate to. I think he had both myos. That's the Chalgei Amir. I don't know, maybe other people feel differently. So Chalgei Amir, he was able to be mafshit and bring it over, and then to be malbishet. That when you left with a gedank that you understood, even though we're talking about different yonim chassidus. He had that chush, he had that keach. Besides the keach hazikon, that's already the second subject of his life. This we're talking about his hashpoah part of life. But then there's a second part, which is the chazaret. I mean, to go ahead.
Right, so when he you speak about how he was magic the button, he could ring, and he put things down, and he gave the ideas of chassidus. What were the kind of things he spoke about? And some of the young that we spoke about they became so widespread today that we don't even attribute it to it. Yeah, we don't realize it reveals this whole way of teaching things, looking at things became a cloud.
One of the things that was his theme many times, let's call it theme if you want to use the Gashmic words, was to oplegen the Emmeskeit from the Mebischen, the reality, the Emmeskeit from Teire, und die Emmeskeit von versteht sich Mitzvahs, the Emmeskeit from Ayid, from Aneshome, the real Emes. That was his stress many times. He spoke a lot, and when he was masberit, it became very clear because he can't untap me the hand, mamish. I mean, the way he explained, which reminded me story. There's a story that Shmuel Greinem, once it was Friday, those in Russia, those in the middle of winter, you could have might have 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock already. So one Friday night, he ate the Suda. He's given 5 o'clock. So he went to sleep. By 11 o'clock, he got up already. I think it's a ganze Nacht lernen Chassidus. In Shul. We learned the meaning von Einheit Mulvade. And that reingetracht and they feel reingelegt in them that he stayed up like that till the morning. Came the morning, people started coming to Shul already. And he opened his eyes and he said over it. Took him a while. What's going on here? So the building, the mention. That's the way you told by him. I remember my Zayda. My Zayda was that I was Malamed, so he used to live in Cleveland, so he had a Pematic Margolius. So once I remember it was he was Fabrengen. From there was no Lavich to come out there. We tried in the middle of the winter in Cleveland was very freezing. I was a kid, I was there, Masber Eined Mulvade in such a way that I remember every kid I could understand. When they finished the Fabrengen, they got up, there's not a lot of people, and one guy, it was snowing, and he couldn't find his boots that he brought. Someone else turns around, one of the other people, and says to him, "What's Kaloshin? Ben Kaloshin?" The truth, I like to say you could that, and the Emmeskeit of Eibush to see that this is the Emmeskeit of Torah and the Emmeskeit of Neshama. That was his stress. The famous thing that he told over when he gave his bus stop, and everyone knows it. I mentioned it many times. So I thought one mullet was Samoshel. He said it happened to him, but I didn't think it was so. I'll say it in a second. But I spoke by Shleishim in Borough Park, Hechel Menachem. So I mentioned it, and I said, Stammit is going to Moshel. So one of the people there, not a Lubavitch, said, no, I heard it from him privately. He said it actually happened to him. What was the story? He was once standing by a bus stop, waiting for the bus, waiting. People gathered. The bus isn't coming. So he turns around to another Yid, like the Yid, no, was the bus is bald kommen. Will the bus come? So the Yid answered, like the Yid answered, otherwise Mashiach kommen, as ich know the bus would come. Otherwise Mashiach should come as fast as the bus. So he says, I told him, I don't know what you're talking about. If the bus will come or not, I'm not sure. Mashiach will come checking the Torah. The Torah checking the Samas. It's not that what. So the guy says to me, I did have Shara Lubavitch. In other words, this was a boshel to give out the was Chassidus makes that the Emmeskeit of Ruchni is the Emmeskeit to look at it, the Kuzvip Shitas and Eilam Pizchachus, and all the Hasboras in it. Then you go into the deeper Yonim, all these Yonim was said to done. These are the Haskalah of it. But there was one goal here to come out of this Nakuda to Emesavai Leilam. That's now everyone take. I'm sure there'll be other people that could say they took other Nakudas from him, but this is the way I saw him.
Right. So you're touching on a very interesting point. I think we think of years, for Haskalah, it's tremendous hamacha and the deep ideas of this. But most of what he pushed the most was the basic yonim of Torah mitzvahs and Talmud Yisrael, and these things, and bringing out how these are real things, and not just things that you're supposed to believe and think about the din and the gavra. This is real.
Right.
It's actually that way. And Rabbi spoke about how the seichel, not so much inside deep seichel, but seichel in the reality of things, and just understanding the thing as it is.
I'll tell you. Once he told me, I was sitting with bringing, not that I was bringing, not so long ago, maybe 10 years ago. There was a story printed in Kvach about a little story, Ben Mashiach. that there was a guy who used to rent a kretschmer from a ports, and he would pay him the place 10 ruble. I don't remember 10 ruble a year. Once he couldn't go, he was not feeling well, so his son went instead. So he's making the deal, and the ports said, you know what? If you take it for 5 years, instead of each year going 10 ruble, something like that, I'll give you 40 ruble. You'll save yourself 10 ruble. Give me a chatchila for I had the 5 years. So it's a good deal. He came back and he told his father, he told his father that I saved the money, so I did this. So I said, what? You wasted money. So you just wasted for 1 year. But the other years, why did you do it? You wasted 30 ruble. You wasted. So Rabbi tells me, wird nicht voll von der Meise von dem, was beim Schogeleg dem ist nachher in Mashiach. Beim das gewesen Porsche verliehen Geld. That's it. That's how it was real. Porsche, you said the time it was not. Don't you believe in Mashiach? The time it was, you made me lose money because him it was real. That was a dogma he gave to the MS guy that's a hoplegen MS guy. It fits to your gashmistic life, not psaruchmistic linyam, but the same thing with Torah, the same thing with the MS guy and David.
You spoke about how the Rebbe was not checking mezuzahs.
Yeah, that he spoke many times. Even a little kid, the Rebbe trained us, a little kid base. The moment you hear somebody is sick, you say, oh, you have checking, but I've cooking the mezuzahs. Doesn't say, I've calling that doctor. So the Rebbe said, it's true. I mean, that was his thing that to make it all real. And he was able to be masberit in such a way that the hopling, that's the Maila. Because Werther Kemezogni, if you don't understand it, the says is perfect.
Real, so real more, you could say the real is more about the emes and the haskalah. So it comes with the emes, and the haskalah was the way of how to.
Even though his main thing was haskalah, his main thing was the understanding, the seichel behind it. But it's also the way to explain it, the way to express it. But the Nakuda bottom line was the emes kaita what this is.
Now moving to the other idea that you spoke about, real pronounced stashis. You spoke a lot about the stashis of the Rebbe. Could you elaborate a little bit more, both how Rabbi himself, how you saw Rabbi himself as a butler in the kitchen for the Rebbe, and how he demanded that from his.
Well, he said to me clearly, I think maybe he said it once under the Torah, I don't know, that when he came here, he was here a while, I don't know, a few weeks, a few months, he was planning to go back. And he asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him, and he told you, he allowed you to come, so Simon, you belong here. He told me that he saw in the beginning, he saw the Rebbe is something special. The Lashon he used to me was, this is a Ishmura Mayam, over a Rebbe, and he understood what a Rebbe is. So to him, in the beginning, it took time to look up, and he said, you know who got it to me? Rabbi Mentlik told him, if you only know the yachas that the Frierdiker Rebbe had to the Rebbe, it would be different. So he got him he pushed. This was, I don't know, a few weeks, a few months after he came already. In other words, his discussion is, because a lot of times I wonder, those Chassidim, if you have Chassidim that became a kusher, the second the Frierdiker one was Nistalik, became a kusher, I can't understand it. Unless it's superficial, then Hank is there, Morgan is there, zweite. That takes time. So I can't understand. Unless I can feel it. But Anoshim came to get that. So it takes, and Take, he once told me that Teichen also. I spoke to him privately many hours. That Teichen, he said that. He also said it's not simple to say, this guy's drinking a kusher. But yet, it's hard to see if a person should become a kusher right away if you're be'emes a kusher. So he said it, and it took him time. It didn't take him long. Something, some Chassidim, maybe the elder Chassidim took 2 years, 3 years, I don't know. But it's Chogeleg be'em, the emes, and then he became completely kusher, and he felt himself the Rebbe's a typewriter. As much as he knew that he is the Chazer, and Sof Kol Sof, the Rebbe's Torah that we have is all thanks to him, even though not everything he wrote, a lot of things written by others, he's the Moker. In other words, the Rebbe Fabrengi, he has it, and from that is geworden, that geschrieben, that this, it came so many svarim and everything, but He's definitely the makir. He knew that, but he really felt this is not.
He still retained his bittul throughout all that.
He really felt that this is the Rebbe's keches. He felt he got a brocha from the Rebbe also. I remember one of the Rebbe told him to drink a cup of wine, and he says, "Gedenke was meret." Rebbe says, "Gave him a brocha, gedenke was meret." But it was not only his koren, it was also his tfisa. That I think by him, if we're talking about that part, I don't think, and again, I'm not the one to judge, that he had a photographic memory. I don't think so. Photographic memory is nicht. Das ist am Atom, was man kriegt. I mean, he had a gewaltige Zekon, there's no question about it, but not. The main thing by him was the tfisa. Because the Rebbe spoke, it's very, sometimes hard, because the middle is, music in the middle, this, you got to happen, and you got to happen in the kuta clothes to see. That's how he remembered. I could see from him. He remembered it because it tape is given in the Yonim, Mervi and Gedenk. So Gedenk, if you don't have his Zekon, it doesn't work. But he was, all this was his bittul to the Rebbe. He was, because Be'emes, you would imagine a person like him with such, I don't know which better words to use, such a position would have feel a certain specialty legabe his closeness to the Rebbe. Feel specialty. So like he has it's a Rebbe. He could go over sometimes more than others. Nothing by him. And he felt that he had a schus to write the sichos. Mamish is a schus. And he once told me privately, this, the truth is, I don't know if I ever told this to anybody. I think it's the first time I'm saying it. And he told me when he wrote the first 9 volumes of the sichos. Later, it was the Rebbe wanted him to work on Sefer Erkim with all kinds of other chreisen that he had, and other people started. So he said to me once, he felt bad that he couldn't do it. But the main thing he says he feels bad is that this is a chelik of the iskashris, and here there's a certain minimizing of what it was before, because that part he didn't have. And that's what bothered him very much. Remember, I was taking a walk for him down on Kingston Avenue, and he's telling me, I want to tell you, this is really what. It's not, because his thing is his iskashris. That was.
Yeah. And he had a yachad like a Talmud. You see him, he's like a Talmud to the Rebbe.
Yeah. Take another circles, a person like that, besides his personality, being the chazer, would be Sheikh Ilam Malchus would sit, but he would. And the Rebbe did not like push it either. The Rebbe did not want to take away his bittul, because the Rebbe could. At Kedikar, there were times of Fabrengens that the Rebbe once spoke things that was not was something about him, something that he said or he did, and the Rebbe was not happy. And the Rebbe could do. Why could the Rebbe wouldn't do it by somebody else? I mean, because he was a kela for this, because his bittul was completely, and that's what he instilled. A lot of the ways of looking at the Rebbe and things like that, the Deir Ashvi, what it is and this, comes from him. And it's not his chidushim. He understood what the Rebbe took it on. He understood together the Deir Ashvi. And a lot of things that we have is because he was able to be mastered.
I mean, you say this idea that everyone knows and everyone shares, and all my students speak about it.
Yeah. And it's all because the way he was able to be mastered, he was able to. And then the Rebbe said, Deilo mashkim and tenas rabbi lachedud. I mean, there's a part of the story is known, and part of the story he didn't want me to tell. He told it to me himself. He tells me like this. This is the famous story of the Kavatayda. The Rebbe spoke once about the Kavatayda. If you cross the Kavatayda, you have to have your own Shavuos. So came Tovshin Chov days, I think. Somebody stayed in his house. Shavuos was that time Sunday, and the guy came from Japan, and then it turned out Rabbi made the cheshbon that his really Shavuos should be then. Anyway, the next day they asked the Rebbe, and the whole aricha is there, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. So then, when he went into the Rebbe, they called him in. The Rebbe, he went to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said, "Yeah, obviously you got to keep your own Shavuos." So he tells me, this is the way he told me. Some people told me that he heard it differently. I heard it from himself. And when I wanted, the ones were sitting by a Fabring and trying to tell it, he says, B'shumei from Yizon. I didn't say it. Later I told it. So he tells me like this. He asked the Rebbe at that time, if the person who keeps his own Shavuos, which is not Vov Sivan, does he say, so, because the Alter Rebbe writes, if your Shavuos is not, you don't say it. If you came on Hey or Zion, you didn't say it. So this guy doesn't, he says to me that he asked the Rebbe didn't want to answer. He saw the Rebbe, he asked the second time, I think that finally he almost like pressured, and the Rebbe answered that he shouldn't say. Okay. Then he tells me he bothered him for a long time, that he Kiviyachol pressured the Rebbe to give an answer, but the Rebbe didn't want. How in the world could I do that? But mir ist eingefallen that I have a right to justify it for him, so he shouldn't feel so bad. Because after all, I write the sichas, so I write I chazim. Meles tachuskum and amol that this will come out, and I'll have to be right. And so it's good that I asked to find out. It wasn't all done. Says I think it was Yuchvat after that, between the sichas, this part he didn't want to tell. He was singing, and he's standing down, and the Rebbe is up, and he is thinking, he doesn't know why, but this came into his mind. This problem, that how could he do such a thing? And then he was thinking to himself before, maybe because I write the sichas. As he's thinking, someone gives him a clap. The Rebbe ruft, the Rebbe called him. The Rebbe called him. He kriegt a roof. The Rebbe gave him a l'chaim, and the Rebbe said, "No, it's doch for deilo mashke metenas Rabbi lachayim." So he says, clearly, the Rebbe was read his machshava and gave him the answer. So he didn't want him to tell. But the Rebbe used that lotion, he told me. For deilo mashke metenas Rabbi lachayim. There's another time he told me that happened, something like this. And the Rebbe was going on by Yakovas with the Sefer, and the people pushing, it was when he was still a Bocher, I think, pushing to push the Rebbe Sefer, and he was amongst them. And the Rebbe took the Sefer and pushed it toward Rabbi to give a kush. And the Rebbe and the Bocher like felt, so the Rebbe said, "No, I schreibt doch die Maimorim." So the Rebbe did say this, so he was, but nevertheless, the Rebbe didn't behave to him like to say kind of him a lot. That's not what he needed. He was able to get complete. Remember when the Rebbe came out with Chanukah that year, first year, made a whole big tumult about it. He went every day Chanukah. Remember, I went with him. We went to give out Meneiras into places like a kosher person.
Right. We did Ashkar, so I'd say Yamov was giving and teaching and as much as he could. Teaching cities, it was his life to teach cities and give over there to teach the same Maimorim again and again and again, and the same way and he never got tired of it.
Even if he said the same Maimorim and the same Biurim, Tanayin Chayes. That's true.
It's his life. To give teaching citizens what his favorite was. Speaking about young
and people felt it. Not Lubavitchers who were mushper from him felt it. We got it.
Okay. So, thank you very much.
I'm not forgetting alle Hashpoas and Tals. The main thing by us is he brought the Rebbe statement to the world, and the Zetmas Yigem and Hashemayim, because he went on the boat to live Eretz Yisrael, Yuchvat, Friedrich Rebbe was in Stalik, Shabbos, Sunday he went on the boat, he didn't even know about it, and he came mamish directly to the Rebbe.
No.
So it's in Hashemayim, and the truth is, I'm not so sure that in the days before we had such a chazer. I'm not sure. I'm not sure like the Chazorah from Tzemach Tzedek, from Alter Rebbe, or Mittel, I mean, these are talking about the regular chazer. I don't know. Shilon was a chazer. Rabbi Simpson was a chazer by the Rebbe Rashab. No one comes to his head. I don't know. So many hours, hours and hours. So Simchas Torah came out Thursday and Friday. You know what happened? Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres was Thursday. Thursday night was a Fabrengen. Friday night there was a Fabrengen. Shabbos afternoon there was a Fabrengen. Motzei Shabbos, Nacht, there was the big Fabrengen. Altogether, I how many hours is it? 15 hours, I don't know. There was no Chazorah in between. Because there was no time for Chazorah. So what we used to do, I used to stand next to him in my time, or later, I don't know, my time, I used to next to him by Hakofis. So quietly, he used to Chazor in Kudus, so we should, but like this, to remember later all these hours and know which one was by this Fabrengen, what was by this Fabrengen. Special.
Everything.
With Chazor. Later we said on Chazorah, after some Chazorah, said on Chazorah, because I know some of them, the Sheikh I wrote, but he used to sit on Chazor. And Chazor with Aseda, like take the Anochas from the Tovshin Chav Beis, Chav Hey, Chavov, all these Anochas from these Fabrengens. It's all from his Chazorah. He didn't write many of those because earlier as he wrote and he stopped, but it's all from his Chazorah. So, anyway, yeah.
We owe him a lot.
Owe him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much. Hope to.
Call to, yeah.